All right, chapter 1.3. What we're going to do today is adding fractions, positive and negative fractions. So, when we're adding rational numbers, you're going to use the same rules we did for adding integers. So, if they both have the same sign, you add and keep the sign. If they have different signs, even though it's an addition problem, you will subtract the two numbers and keep the sign of the greater absolute value. So same as we did with integers, now we're just going to do fractions. Alright, so we have 11 over 12 plus negative 7 over 12. The very first thing we look at is, do they have the same denominator? Yes, they do. So now on the addition problem, a positive and a negative, we are going to subtract. So 11 minus 7 gives us 4 twelfths. Now that, and it is positive because 11 is bigger than 7, and 11 is positive. Then we look over here, 4 over 12. That can be simplified. So what can we take out of 4 and 12? We could take a 4 out. So if we divide by 4, we end up with 1 over 3. All right, so we have another problem here. Now on this one though, look at the denominators. We have one that's an 8 and one that's a 4. So we need a common denominator first. So for a common denominator, I always look at the biggest bottom number and see if that works. So 8 is the biggest number. So I think, is there anything that I can multiply 4 by to get 8? Oh, 4 times 2. So if I multiply the bottom by 2, I multiply the top by 2. So I end up with 2 over 8. So you've got to have a common denominator before you do anything with fractions. Now we look, one's negative, one's positive. So they have different signs, so we have to find the difference. So we end up with negative 7, 2. So we subtract these, we get 5. There's more negatives. So we get negative 5 over 8. And you can't simplify, so that negative 5 over 8 is your correct answer. Okay, now this one, it has a mixed number and it has an improper fraction. What you need to do is either make sure they're both mixed numbers or they're both improper. It's up to you, whatever you like to do. I like to do mixed numbers, but some other people like to do improper. So I'm going to go ahead and change this 20 over 3 to 6 and 2/3, because 6 times 3 is 18, plus 2 is 20. So basically I just divided 3 into 20 and I got 6 with a remainder of 2. So now I have negative 6 and 1/3 and a positive 6 and 2/3. They both have a 3 for the denominator, so we're good. Now, since I'm using mixed numbers, you always want to put the bigger one on top. So I like to stack them. And then, since one's negative, one's positive, I'm going to subtract. 2/3 minus 1/3 is 1/3, and 6 minus 6 is nothing. So we end up with 1/3, and it's positive because there are more positives, because 6 and 2/3 is bigger, and it is positive. Now this one, we have 2, and we have negative 7 over 2. You can either change it to a mixed number like we did on the last one, or you can change this to improper. So I'm going to put this as 2 over 1. Anytime you have a whole number, you can put it over 1. To get a common denominator, we want 2. So I'm going to have to multiply this by 2 and the top by 2. So that's going to give me 4 over 2 plus negative 7 over 2. So now I have a common denominator. So 7 minus 4 is 3. And there's more negatives, so it's a negative 3 over 2. And this is improper, so we're going to change this. We're going to do the 3 divided by 2, it goes 1 time with the remainder 1. So we end up with negative 1 and 1/2. Don't forget your sign. Always go back and double check your signs. Alright, this example, we have a common denominator. This is a mixed number, but this one's not improper, so we're fine. Now, one thing you want to be careful of, this whole problem right here is negative. So, on that one, negative 1 and 1/5. So, since they're both negative, you're going to add the top numbers. So, 1 plus 3 is 4. So, that's how we got the 4 over 5. And the 1, nothing to add to it. So you end up with negative 1 and 4/5. Because remember, if they're the same sign, you add and keep the sign. So just be careful. A lot of people try to subtract the 1 and the 3, and they end up with like negative 1 and 2/5. So just remember the entire thing's negative if there's a negative sign with it. Okay, on this one, we first need to get a common denominator. So we're going to look for a common denominator for 5 and 20. So again, I always like to take the bigger number, 20, and then think 5 times something, give me 20. Yep, 5 times 4 is 20. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 4. So we end up with negative 16 over 20, and we still have the 3 over 20. So now we've got our common denominator. Now the top has a negative and a positive, so they have different signs. So what do we do if we have different signs? We are going to subtract. So 16 minus 3 is 13, and there's more negatives. So we end up with a negative 13 over 20. All right, this one we need a common denominator. Now 6 is the bigger number. The problem is 4 times something, you can't get 6. So 4 times the whole number. So what we got to do is think of another common denominator. So something 4 and 6 both go into. So 12 would work. So 4 times 3 is 12, and 6 times 2 is 12. So you notice how I'm multiplying the top and the bottom by the same number. So we end up with negative 5 and 9/12 and negative 4 and 10/12. That's from multiplying these. Now we have our common denominator. And so they're both negative, so we're going to add these. So 9 plus 10 is 19 over 12. And then the negative 4 plus negative 5 is negative 9. Now the only problem is the fraction part is improper. So we got to go, okay, how many times does 12 go into 19? It goes 1 time. So you're going to put the 1 with the 9. So that's going to become negative 10. And then the remainder would just be 7. So you end up with negative 10 and 7/12. So again, with fractions, a little harder. You got to make sure you have common denominator. Make sure they're either both mixed or both improper. And use the integer rules. So good luck.